Hello and welcome back to the final video in this series about learning Java. And today we are talking about keywords. What's a keyword? Java has a set of keywords that are restricted use. That means they mean something in the language, and you cannot name a variable or class or other object with that name. We'll talk about all of them, but first I'm going to show you one particular one because it only makes sense in a use case. So I've got a loop, basically a loop that we saw all the way back in the video on loops. It's a while loop. We start this with this variable I at 0. We're going up to 5, this while loop, and we're printing I every time and then adding 1 to I. Print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to make another loop. I'm going to reset I to 0. And then add what's called a do while loop. With do, print I, add 1 to I. While I is less than cap. So right now, cap is 5. This loop does exactly the same thing. It runs through the loop, it checks that I is less than cap, goes back to the top, and keeps running until I gets to 5, and then it stops. That's not true. We're going to start at 0. Print 0, runs. Print 1, prints 2, prints 3, prints 4. When it's 4, I should explain how a do loop works first. A while loop checks that the condition is met and then runs the code, then goes back to the top. A do loop does it in the opposite order. It runs the code inside and then checks that the condition is still met. So the way I'm thinking about this is once I is 4, we start at the top of the loop. We're going to print 4. We're going to add 1 to I. That makes it 5. Then 5 is no longer less than 5, so we'll stop. This loop will print exactly the same thing as the loop at the top. If I change cap to be 0, I is not less than cap, the loop doesn't run. This loop will print 0. It runs the code first, it prints 0, and then makes it 1, makes I 1. 1 isn't less than 0, so it stops. The important thing here is that a do loop will always run at least once. A normal while loop will only run at all if the condition is met the first time, and it'll keep running until the condition stops being met. Now, there are a lot of other keywords. We've covered most of them already, so I'm going to run through them really fast. There are 8 primitive types. We talked about these in the very first video. Byte, short, int, and long are integer number types. Float and double are decimal types, floating point. Chars are characters, 0 to 127 for the ASCII characters. And booleans are true or false. String is a non-primitive type. It's not a keyword. You can name a variable string. It's just not a great idea. The other keywords we already covered. If and else for if statements. If else statements, switch statements, and the other keywords in there. Case and default case specifies which cases you're going through, and default is our default case if none of the other cases run. We have break. They're in switch box, and they're also in loops. It says exit whatever block you're in unless it's an if block. Continue, skip one iteration of a loop. Do and while, which we just saw here, are while loops and are do while loops, and then for loops. Void for a method that doesn't return anything, and return if you have to return something within a method. Use return. Class creates a class. New specifies creates a new object of a particular class. This, which references a particular object, the object you're using, or in limited other circumstances, it can reference something else. Super, which references a parent class, a parent constructor. Interface and enum or enumerator, which are abstract, like class-ish things, interfaces and enumerators. throw, which throws an error, try, catch, and finally, which are those blocks that specify run this code, but if it doesn't work, do something else, and then do the last thing. Now we'll talk about some new ones. I can call just about anything final. That means it can't change. If I put final on this up here, which I probably should have to begin with, I don't want this to change. I can't edit it all. If I try to change it, it will throw an error. If I put final on I, it'll say, why are you changing it? Or at least it should. I'm not supposed to be able to do this. Final variables and final classes, you can't change them at all. We've got abstract. It applies mostly to classes. We saw how it works with classes. It creates an abstract class that you can't create instances of. You can also put it on methods. I haven't used it for that. I don't really know how it works. You can find all of the information I'm going to cover in this video on the internet. Most of these are like very common things. Static, we've seen this one a lot, and I've been avoiding explaining what it means. Static means that it is a property of the class and not instances of the class. So for this example, in this class, I have a static method main. I can call m keywords if I went outside this class somehow, which I'm not supposed to be able to do in this file. M keywords main. This can run how the Java language runs things. If this wasn't static, I would have to say, I would have to create an instance of m keywords first. Just empty parentheses, and then make call main as a method on the object that's an instance of the class m keywords. You'll see there's an error here, which is that we need that I've put code outside the class for the file. In every file in Java, every file is one class. You don't put anything outside the class except the things we'll talk about at the very end of this video. Then there's 3 modifiers called access modifiers. Private means a method or a property, a variable, can only be accessed within the class that you specify as private. Protected means it's private, but then also it can be a method or variable can be accessed inside the class that's referenced, or other classes inside the package. We'll talk about package at the end of the video, or any class that inherits the class that has the protected variable. Then there's public, which means any class that can figure out how to reach this class can get that variable or method, or you can even put it on classes, as we've always seen, so you can access it in other places. The last thing about, because we're talking about access modifiers, I want to talk about variables. I talked briefly about this in a previous video. There's a principle called scope, which means if I define a variable inside a block of code, that's anything defined by curly brackets, that variable can only be used inside that block of code. Usually, blocks do something, like a loop, or an if block, or a switch block, or a method, or a class. You can also just define a block of code. If I define a variable in here, like int j, I can't access that variable anywhere outside these curly brackets. It only exists in here. Any block inside the class, or basically anything, this variable cap is called global because it can be accessed anywhere in this file. It's not public, so it can't be accessed in the class. It can only be accessed inside the method. But if I find it in the class, I would say it's global. It can be accessed anywhere in the class. This j, which I just defined, is private. No, not private, local. It can only be accessed inside a particular block of code. Global versus local. if you're working on a scope that's bigger than just one file, a global variable can be accessed in any file, any of the files you're talking about. A local variable can be accessed maybe in just one file or in just part of one file. The terms are kind of loose depending on what you're talking about. Then we talked about extends and implements, which means a class can extend another class or implement an interface. Then there are these two others about inheritance. A keyword instance of, it's a Boolean, so I can check that I is an instance of int. Maybe I can't. I'm not sure if that'll work. If you had a class, like I could check if something was an instance of m keywords or an instance of person from our various class videos. An object is an instance of a class, and this entire phrase returns a Boolean expression. Is a Boolean expression, returns a Boolean. Either true, it is an instance, or it's false, it's not an instance. And then the other thing we can put in class is, like, if I define a class is always start with a capital letter, I can say this throws an exception. Just saying it throws an exception is not very interesting. I don't know why that's there. But I could say throws array index out of bounds exception. That's the one I can think of off the top of my head. It's the one I've used a lot. There are a variety of other kinds of exceptions. You can specify what kinds of exceptions a class throws, or maybe a method throws, because then when you implement make an instance of that class or call that method, you know what errors it might throw, and then the code, usually your editor will try to account for that and make sure you've dealt with any possible errors that implementation could be throwing. Last thing, outside the class, I said there were only a couple things that go outside the class. They're called package and import. I'm going to throw errors because I haven't specified anything here. I could make my package java.source. Line of code. Okay. I'm not actually in a package. I haven't really well defined what my package is here. So this is saying, no, it shouldn't have a package at all. If you look over here, you can see how this is laid out. I have a folder with the entire project, and inside it are 4 folders. One of them is called source, which has all of the files that I've been writing in for the videos. For some projects, the editor will say, this is the packages in. Usually, the editor will put that in automatically when you create a new file. So the fact that I didn't have it already means I probably am not working in what the editor recognizes as a package. I think I can change what the package is. I haven't used I haven't used packages a lot, so I don't really know how you define a package. I just know that when I use this editor, it tells me automatically when I'm in what package I'm in. Then I can import public classes and variables from other places. This one you have to end a line with a semicolon. Packages I don't think. But I could take this from somewhere off the internet as long as I have the proper connections, like I've downloaded. If I've downloaded it, maybe I could take it from somewhere on my computer, or I can say I know where this is on the internet and I'm going to take it from there. As long as the editor and the compiler, the thing that's running the code, can access that and knows where to find it, the import will work and I can get those imported things. That's all of the keywords I have to talk about. So that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and I don't think there's going to be a next video. So that's it for the series. Thank you for watching.